right, so let's get this started. So we've got a lot to go through. So in terms of for Final Fantasy 1 and 3, the characters had no personality. Um, so I'm just gonna drop them all in there. There's not much to say. Like I could evaluate them on power level or on variety or anything, but like, what's the point of talking about them? They're nobodies. Um, is this all FF2? Yeah, I guess this is all FF2. So let's start with I do want to have a this character just sucks category, so SABCF, that seems good. Okay, there we go. So Cecil, I actually rate Cecil fairly highly. He's fairly generic overall, but I really appreciate. I'm gonna put Rosa. Let's put them in B. Actually, they're not amazing, but I really appreciate the relationship the two of them had. The fact that they are a already established couple who is going through this journey, rather than the typical JRPG trope of, oh, we met and fell in love on the journey. Blah. I do quite appreciate the fact that they gave these two characters an actual defined relationship, had them overcome things together, and kind of build on that. Kane is one of my favorite characters of all time. I adore Kane. I really like the way they had him kind of. First of all, the fact that he has so much emotional trauma that he's going through, and the way they kind of used that against him almost, but also, especially when you get into the after years, gave him a chance to kind of grow past it. Um, I relate a lot to Kane, and he just seems so amazingly cool with his like the dragoon and the armor and everything. Um, that being said, Rydia is my favorite character in the Final Fantasy series. Um, we're we're starting early by getting to the top here. Rydia's story, the idea that she has to um okay. I just realized I was not 100% confident that I had actually placed my order for food. The way that she has to deal with one, everything she's lost, but then coming to realize that like the person who she blames for it wasn't actually responsible for it. They didn't know what they were doing, and then comes to get to know that person and forgive them over time. The only sad part about Rydia is that she has to deal with Edge, who is just a dumb playboy. But like the whole her going away and coming back fully grown and realizing that like if she wants to help the like she needs to be a part of helping the world despite what happened to her. Her story just gives me hope, really. I think Tella is also a fairly good character. Um, his I appreciate the degree of protectiveness he has, but also the fact that kind of he. I guess what's the best way of putting it? not so much he learns to get over it, but the way that he has to kind of cope with the loss he has, and the fact that he's willing to put his life on the line for it. I think he's fairly well written. He's an appreciable character. Similarly, I also think that Edward is a fairly appreciable character. They're all like, they're not amazing, but they're characters you can understand their story for. Edward is he's your average person. Like he is rich, so like he's royalty. He's not entirely your average person, but like in terms of capability, he's not any better than anyone else. His only unique skill is playing instruments. But he wants to do something with this. He wants to help people. He wants to save people. He wants to, but he can't. However, he does what he can, and he ends up being instrumental in the hero's ability to do what they need to do. So like I think there's an element of understandability for that. As far as Yang goes, I think they just didn't do anything with Yang. I don't hate him. I don't think he's an awful character, but I did not get any sense of like he's a character that had like a rich story or anything. The most interesting part of Yang's story is the fact that you get to hit him with a pan. And when the most interesting part of your story is being hit with a pan, you're not a very interesting character. The twins here, I'm going to put them in B and C. I think that they're fairly similar, but I think Porum is has a bit more going for her as a character. Like, you really get the sense that she is that like she's constantly dealing with this absolute obnoxious brat of a brother of hers, and like, but she still cares, and she's trying her best to do what she can. And the idea, like the way the two of them sacrifice themselves to save everyone is very very telling of their character, even despite that. So I'm gonna put them, but I don't think that they're, again, similar to Young, they're not very well fleshed out characters. There's not a ton of personality to them. Sid, I think I'm gonna put kind of in the middle here, middle of B. I do think Sid is a good character. I don't think that I have a problem with Sid. I don't think there's anything about him that's like, ugh, this is the worst, but he's kind of comic relief. And there's a threshold to how good a character comic relief can be, and very few characters like actually capture that well. And I don't think that Sid does a bad job of it, but I don't think he's like the bar for what comic relief can be. But I do think I do think it's interesting, like the way he kind of pulls everyone into his schemes, and he's just, no matter what happens to him, he always gets back up and is always right back out there like, oh, this is something I can do. I'm gonna do it. And that's interesting. Sorry, Edge, you're just a playboy. I don't like you. Edge is another one of those characters who has very little personality, very little development. But what little you get of his development is basically just him being a player. And that's not an interesting character to me. I think Fusoya kind of falls in this category as well. He's not on the screen for long enough to really have a solid personality. We're gonna have to deal with ads occasionally. Sorry about that. I can no longer justify paying the like $15 a month for YouTube Premium. I wish I could. I hate YouTube ads, but anyways. So here we're getting to Bart's. I don't think Bart's is a very good protagonist. He's just kind of... In fact, I think most of FF5's characters, except... I'm just going to put most of FF5's characters on where I put them, and then I'm going to talk about FF5 as from a story perspective. So, like, Bart's and and Lena are pretty much without personality. Like, they don't really have much going for them. Lena's only moments of character development, of real character development, happen around her sister or her dragon. And those two, those moments don't really build to give anything tangible for them. Um, and I think that's kind of why they fall short. I do think that Galoof has a little bit with his kind of he actually has ambitions and goals. Like, there's things he wants to do, and the little twists surrounding his history and who he is go a long way to give him that just enough personality to give him that little bit of an edge, but not enough to actually mean anything. I think these two characters have more actual personality. I think Kryl stepping up to actually take her grandfather's role and kind of giving us that little bit of a... She kind of fills an interesting role in the story for what it is. And then everybody's favorite pirate queen, Ferris. She is... Her moments are kind of comic reliefish as well, but she's not a comic relief character. She is used in a way of comic relief, which gives her a little bit of, again, a little bit more personality. There's just so little to say about the FF5 cast, similar to the FF3 cast, but they actually have defined identities, whereas the FF3 characters and the FF1 characters are just who they are. I could theoretically rate the FF1 characters based off of 8-bit theater. That would be hilarious, but we're not going to do that today. Now, Terra, now that we're getting into FF6, we're getting into some characters with some real... some real soul here, as it were. Terra's a great character. She's not one of like my top characters, but I really appreciated her journey to discover herself, and then where she falls into the second half of the game with her kind of taking a backseat in terms of being the protagonist as much, leaving that more to Celeste, and then with her just trying to find, you know, the opportunity to live as a person and not be this object that she's been used as for most of her life. I thought that they did a fantastic job of kind of giving her that kind of role. Is this next one supposed to be... This next one I think is supposed to be Biggs and Wedge. Yeah. Yeah. I guess we'll edit out the FF1 and 3. They have nothing. They're in the game for 5 minutes to give Terra someone to kill. Accidentally. Locke? I've always liked Locke. He's got a bit of the same kind of playboy going as Edge, but he directs it in, like... Is this one going to be music? Yes, it is. This one's not just music. Let's just... Let's see if I can find a... There we go. Screw it. I found a lo-fi mix. Let's just find some Final Fantasy. Hopefully it won't get me my video taken down for copyright, but we'll see. Anyways, back to this. Yeah, he basically... sorry, we were talking about Locke. So Locke, the interesting thing about Locke, for me, is that his primary goal is always to protect. He's traumatized by failing to protect someone he cared deeply about. And thus, everything he does is always to try and protect those around him. Even though he gives off the flippant vibes of not really caring about much and of just being a playboy. You see the moments where he's like with Celeste and taking like the front seat of trying to protect her, or with Tara as well. And then when you get to the actual backstory of Rachel specifically, it's hard not to be like, oh, okay, I see. Like, I appreciate this. It's a good character development. Um, and thus he's always I've had a soft spot in my heart for Locke. I think we're gonna put the twins together here because I think that their story is similar enough that I don't think there's much room to really separate them. I think the two of them are foils for each other. They have but I think they're both good characters in the sense of being the way that they kind of defy the perspectives of their roles. So like, I think I might let's put Sabin slightly above Edgar. Like Sabin's ability or the ability with the writers to portray Sabin as being both this extremely strong character, but also this incredibly vulnerable, incredibly like emotionally not entirely mature character is just really, really good. Like, I think the times that they tried to make him comic relief kind of took a bit away from him, and I think that's a mistake they made, and that kind of holds him back from being like really good. But if you take away those, he is such a good perspective on like a strong but not emotionally repressed character. Um, Edgar's in a similar boat. Edgar has he's got the composed aspect to him, but you also know that he has the same kind of trauma in him, just he reacted differently because he's a different person, and I really appreciate like the dichotomy between the two of them. But of course, Edgar's playboy instincts similarly hold him back. Um, but that's just writing characters for those days. I think I'm gonna put Bannon kind of down here. He has like 10 lines of dialogue and basically doesn't exist. I think the complexity of Celeste is such that she deserves to be at the at the top of the Final Fantasy VI section. She is one of my favorite characters, and the intricacy and complexity that they gave her in between the fact that she was experimented on to give her magic, so she kind of has that she's different from everyone else vibe, but she's also questioning the ethics of what her kingdom is doing, what her empire is doing, and thus ends up betraying them in the process. But also, she just wants to reconcile everything. Like, she has this deep seated urge to try and bring back a peaceful time that didn't really exist, to try and have everyone be happy. And, like, that's, again, very relatable, and I appreciate that a lot. Cyan. Man, the I aside again, similar to Sabin, I think the attempts to make him comic relief kind of held him back a little bit from being as good as he could have been. But like, man, the his scene in the second half of the game is one of the most memorable scenes in FF6 for me. Him going as well as the Doom Train segment, but like him getting caught in the nightmare of his loss, but all and then also the scene with him where he poses as the woman's long lost boyfriend to send letters to her to try and cheer her up to keep her from losing hope in this apocalyptic nightmare world, just to try and bring a little bit of joy to the world. Like that tells you the type of character he is. I mean, it was probably wrong of him to not be honest, but at the same time, like it's hard not to understand the feeling of like, I just don't want to bring sadness to the world. Hell, I feel that myself. Um, Shadow's an interesting one because, like, if you just played the main story, he's like here. But when you get into like getting a little bit of his story from like the hidden story bits with like the ins and the afterworld and realizing who he really is, there's actually some interesting stuff there. I really wish he had had more screen time and given him the chance to like really develop as a character, or had more of those flashbacks to really like define his personality, because like he could easily be up here, but I think I have to put him here because they just didn't give him the time to be. Gao, I love Gao. Gao is comic relief, but he's also he has a tragic backstory, and like you really just get the feeling he just wants to have a family. Um, but like when you meet who his father is, and there's the little side story with that, and understanding the history, I love Gao as a character. I really feel for him. Um, I think Setzer belongs maybe here. Yeah, I think the scene in the tomb makes me want to bump him up, but I think I have to keep him down because like kind of similar to some of the other characters, like there's an element of his personality that's just not quite fleshed out fully, and I think that holds him back from being what he could be. But like when you go and find the second airship, if you don't like tear up a little at the the flashback scenes and everything going on during that, I don't think you have a heart, because that was top notch. Um, I, I think I just have to put Mog in the no personality category. Like he has style, but like he doesn't really have a role in the story. There's no character development for him. Maybe let's just leave it as is. I think that's. I think Strago has to go kind of down here, though. I like Strago somewhat, but I can't really give him that much of a note, because they just don't really develop him. Like he's mostly used as comic relief and as a foil for Realm, who is a much better character. I think I'm gonna put Realm right below the twins. We're just gonna I he's not awful. The General Leo's not awful. He's fine. He is what he is. And now we can move on past that, because like there's not much to say. Um, Switch that out a little bit further again. Um, for but Realm, I think Realm has this really. She's one of the few child characters in the Final Fantasy series that really rises above being a child character to be just a good character. It's so easy to write child characters to just be child characters. I think they did that a bit with some of the others. With like, I think that's where part of where Palom fell short. Part of where, when we get to her, um, Aiko falls short. A lot of these like, I am just a child characters. They just don't have much going for them, and that's kind of a pity. Um, no personality here and no personality here. I love Go-Go. Go-Go is a great unit. He's great to have on your party. There's some silliness surrounding him, but there's no story there. Now we're on to FF7. Here's where they started doing a bit better job of actually having character arcs. I think some of the older games, other than FF4 and FF6, really didn't have character arcs. Um, but I also don't think that FF7's characters in the original FF7 were that great. I think I'm going to judge this based off of like the FF7 remake versions of the characters because they're actually fleshed out. Um, and on that, I think I'm going to put Cloud kind of in the. I think I'll put him in like the middle of B. Cloud is a fine character, but again, he's not great. Um, the original Cloud was kind of meh. I would have gone with C for like FF7 Cloud, but FF7R Cloud has a lot more going for him. There's a lot more personality there, and there's a lot more actual development. Like you really see what he's going through much better. Barrett is going in the A tier. I think maybe right above Locke. I honestly think that FF7 Remake Barrett is a really well-written character. I don't like him that much, because I just find him kind of obnoxious a little bit. But, like, that's just a personality clash. His personality clashes a bit with mine, with the type of character that I resonate with. But I think he's a well-written character for what he is, and I really appreciate what they did with him. And I think they did such a good job of turning him from being just a stereotype into a really well-written character. Like, he would have been in low C tier, maybe even F tier in the original, but he is a top-notch character, and he is an example of why I'm so glad they did the remake. Tifa, I don't like FF7 Remake Tifa. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't like the original Tifa that much either. I'm not like a huge Tifa fanboy. Um, I don't think she's a bad character, and I think she's pretty decently written in FF7R, but I think they haven't done a good job of fleshing her out yet, at least. And, um, yeah, I hope that the third chapter gives her the scenes that she needs to really flesh out and kind of bump her up, but for now, I'm not sold. Aerith is going right. Aerith is my favorite character in the remake. I think they did a phenomenal job of turning Aerith into exactly what she needs to be from just being the perfect sacrificial character. Like in the original FF7, she was very much like she was still interesting, but she was very much you knew she was gonna die. The story could never work if she didn't die. Whereas FF7 Remake, her dying was less guaranteed. I was still pretty confident it was going to happen, but like it was less of a foregone conclusion just based off her personality that she had to disappear, and more of a like actual story plot. Um, Red 13. Honestly, I think remake has not been terribly kind to Red 13. I think I'll put him. Honestly, I think I'm gonna put him in the C tier. I don't think he's terrible. Like he's kind of right along these other C tier characters where I like some of what they did with him, but for the most part, I'm not the hugest fan. Um, Yuffie, I think I'm in a similar boat. I did not love Yuffie. I think she's better than she was in the original. I think they gave her a lot more personality, and I think that some of her scenes with like Barrett and with Cloud have a lot of personality to them. But like, I don't really think she's a full character yet. So maybe we haven't gotten to her arc. We have not gone to Wutai. I don't know if we will. So maybe we haven't gotten to her arc yet, and maybe she'll like Tifa. She'll really make sense later. I'm sorry, I don't like Kate Seth. There's just I almost want to put him in the no personality category, but like he has a personality, I just don't like it. There's so much about him that's kind of really poorly handled. Like his whole sacrifice thing and the fact that everyone's sad about it, it's like we know he's a remote controlled doll. We already know that. That's not a mystery, that's not a secret, that's not something we're not aware of. We don't think he's a living being. So why are we tragic at him doing that? Realistically, it was the logical choice. Anyways, enough ranting about Kate Sith. Kate Sith is a bad character. Vincent has a lot of potential. I think that I'm going to put him in C for now because I don't think he's fulfilling that potential in the remake, but I do think he is a noteworthy character. Um, it is break time though, so I'm going to pop a quick ad break and I'll be back in a few minutes. Alright, let's get back to this. So I think I'm going to put Sid right next to Yuffie. Um, for similar reasons. I feel like they just didn't. They haven't. It feels like they haven't finished his arc yet, which makes sense because they basically removed his entire arc. We didn't really get the Rocket Town visit or any of that stuff in the remake. So I imagine that stuff's all for R3. I guess Rocket Town, Wu Tai, and the North Crater. Squall. I'm sorry. Squall is just worse Cloud. There's really not much for me to say about Squall. I didn't feel much for him. And Cloud is already not a high bar to hit, to be clear. So you've got a low bar and you're not hitting it. I think Quistis is a bit better. Aside from the whole appearance aspect, which she's obviously very attractive and a very popular character on that, I think they did a good job of giving her like a role in the story that actually makes sense. Which is something they did not do for Zell or Selphie, both of whom kind of just feel like they're there to be party members. While I'm at it, I'm also going to put Laguna's friends there as well. They feel like they exist solely because we needed more party members, not because they had good ideas for characters. They're not so nothing that they go down in the no personality category, but there's not much to those four. Cypher, I think, is a little bit better. You can kind of resonate with his desire to be the perfect knight, like his reach for perfection and how that got kind of tainted on him, manipulated into being evil, is a relatable story for a lot of characters. Laguna, I actually really like Laguna's story. I don't think I think I'll put him kind of right by where Rosa and Cecil are. I think Laguna is a good character. Laguna is genuinely a strong character. He has a lot going for his writing and his role in the world and everything. Similar to how Cloud is just, or Squall is just worse Cloud, I honestly kind of feel like Renoa is just a worse version of all of the other female leads that have come before. I don't think she's as bad as, like, Squall is. And definitely, she is definitely my type in terms of, like, appearance, but I can't give her high marks. Although I will say, I did actually quite enjoy the writing between Squall and Renoa a fair bit. I thought they had one of the better romance arcs in Final Fantasy games of the we just meet and fall in love type. Actually, Irvin is going down here too. Irvin's actually going a little bit below the others, honestly. Irvin's he's just boring. I don't care about Irvin at all. He feels like he just exists so that there can be an American stereotype because all 90s JRPGs needed an American stereotype somewhere within. Edea though, she might be one of the best. Like she's one of the best characters in the story. I thought that like as she, her not Ultimisia. Ultimisia is a terrible villain, but Edea as a character with the backstory that she has and everything that is involved with her, Edea is actually fairly interesting. She kind of has a bit of a not quite as well written version of Kane vibes. Getting into Final Fantasy IX now. Final Fantasy IX is one of my favorites. Some crunch. And a lot of the reason 9 is one of my favorites is because its cast is very strong. Um, I think Zidane though is well, actually no. I think Zidane is one of the weaker uh, protagonists from among the games that I really love. But I even think that like there's some odd stuff with Zidane or Zidane, however you want to pronounce it. But the scenes of him coming to terms with his existential crisis are some of the most poignant scenes in the game. And it's hard for me to rate him lowly when I think about that. When I think about how much the You're Not Alone scene moved me, and how much, like, I felt for his kind of reclaiming himself, it's hard for me to rate him any lower than A tier. He's going to go at the bottom of A tier, but because I do think that the oddnesses in his early character count for something. But I think he's very good. Blank. Honestly, I'm putting all of these characters, the Tantalus Thieves, they're mostly going pretty low. They're going in the C tier. There's not a lot to say about them. They do have some personality, but it's not much. I think Blank has a little bit more, so he can kind of sit at the bottom of B, but it's hard to really put them any higher. Now here we have my second favorite Final Fantasy character. Edging out Kain ever so slightly, we have Vivi. Vivi's writing, the story, the way they portrayed him in that story is absolutely masterful. Again, like, Final Fantasy IX is a story of existential crises. Most characters are going through some form of existential crisis for most of the game. But Vivi trying to figure out who he is, what he is, where his where he fits in the world, how much of a life he can actually have, come to understand what living is. They just did such a good job with him. And I adore Vivi for it. Steiner, on the other hand, Steiner is my least favorite character in Final Fantasy IX. I'm debating putting him at the top of F, but I just don't think he's quite that bad. Steiner is just so annoying throughout the entire game. I can't stand him. Anytime they forced me to have him in the party, I always resented it. I tried my best to never use him, and I just he was so he was too stubborn to really make sense as a stubborn person. And he was too much comic relief for me to emotionally invest in him. Garnet, I think overall Garnet was a fairly strong character. She is not my favorite female lead in the story, obviously. But I think she was a good, well developed character, and I think that her progression of having to come to terms with the fact that her mother was, first of all, her mother wasn't her real mother, but also that her mother was, responsible for a lot of what happened, even if she wasn't entirely responsible for it. I thought there was a lot of depth to her that really shone through in some of the later scenes. Freya is the perfect foil to Zidane. Freya really did a good job of providing Zidane with a character to kind of who knew him, but who he was not romantically interested in. Because Zidane was a bit of a playboy, which is probably his biggest flaw as a character, is that he has that edge or like the same problem as Edge does. My brain just blanked on who else I was talking about. But Freya is the characters that can talk to Zidane. She is the character who knows Zidane from before, and who can actually get through to him, who can actually get him to think. And I think that was important for the story. Quina was another one of those characters where they were mostly comic relief. They were an optional character. You didn't have to get them. And they served a minimal role in the story as a result. But they did still have some interesting moments. And I think I actually found them less annoying than Steiner. So, but they're in that same kind of middle C category. Maybe right below the nothing characters. Yeah, right below the characters who seem to just exist to be a character. I think is where Quina belongs. And now we have the best female character in FF9. Beatrix is a top-notch character. She is well written, she is interesting, she is only on screen for not very long, but that's all you needed for her. Like, they did such a good job with the minimal time they had with her on the screen that she is incredible. And like the moment at the end where, during the ending where like Garnet gets up to try and leave and like she briefly stops Garnet but then moves out of the way, it's like, And the whole Steiner's one good moment was the moment when he was alone with Beatrix and they were fighting together. Like, that scene was really good. But it was mostly Beatrix carrying it. Aiko, as I said earlier, she has the problem of she is a child character, and they just made her a child. But they also tried to make her kind of weirdly, like, a weirdly obsessive with Zidane from a romantic perspective, despite being like 10 years old. It did not work. Did not work at all. I don't think she's quite that bad. She's not worse than Edge, but like she is in the F tier. Amarant. Amarant is going to go right in the middle of these characters who had very little development. There's a few moments where I really felt Amarant's presence in the story and that it was a positive. But for the most part, it just felt like he was a character that they had an idea for, but they didn't have a story for. Good old FF10 now. Where do we put Tedious? I think low B. I don't think Tedious was a bad character. A lot of people give... I think Tedious gets an undeserved bad rap because of the laughter scene. But I actually appreciated what the laughter scene was doing. Because it was supposed to sound like that. And I think Tedious is a good example of a character scarred by childhood trauma caused by bad parenting. I think they did a pretty good job of that. Auron, I never really liked Auron. A lot of people say he's amazing, but like his story never resonated with me, and I never really had much fondness for him as a whole. Riku, I liked a fair bit. I think Riku might be my favorite character from FF10. I thought that her role as being kind of the humanizing element for this group of people that were constantly being dehumanized by the society was effective, and I thought she was a funny character. I thought she had a good, an interesting personality. And I enjoyed the scenes where she got to shine. Fuck you, Waka. I know that Waka is supposed to be the racist who overcomes his prejudice with experience, but there was no work put in for that payoff. He was a racist until he was not a racist, and there was no moment of him kind of apologizing for what he did or actually coming to terms with the reality of his prejudice. He just was a racist, continued being a racist, acted like a racist, and then suddenly he had a friend, so he was no longer racist. I hate Waka. Waka is one of the worst characters in the series, and I will not be taking questions. Yuna, I think, kind of similar to Riku, I think she was a fairly well-developed character. I think Yuna was missing... There was something in her, either her story or her character development that was not quite... that didn't feel complete. I liked what we had of her, but I felt like, and this is weird because she's the female lead, but it felt like they missed a scene. Like it almost felt like there were a couple of scenes that were edited out of the game that would have helped to develop it. But I do think that Yuna and Tidus had my favorite um, boy meets girl, boy and girl fall in love arc in the series. I think they did a really good job with that from like a relationship standpoint. So, take that for what it's worth. Lulu, I don't like Lulu. I don't feel like she deserves the praise she gets as a character. She just kind of comes across as being like a bit of a bitch. And not in a fun way. Like I just don't like her. I did not feel like she made sense for where her role was. And I think similar to like characters like Selfie and that, Kimari was a character who was mostly there because they wanted to have a character. I don't think that his role in the story really culminated in much for me. I would say he's slightly better than the other characters that I feel that way about. There's a bit more of him, a bit more to him, I guess is the better way of putting it, but I feel kind of the same way. And now, wait, who the fuck is this? Oh, right, I remember now. The core cast of Final Fantasy XII, the worst characters in the series. They're so bad. They're so nothing and they're so bad, and how you make nothing so bad, I don't know, but I hate those characters so much. I'm gonna put the other characters that I don't have a lot to say about, other than that I didn't like them and they didn't do anything for me. Before we get to the rest of the FF12 cast. So, Ash, I think, is probably the weakest leading lady in Final Fantasy history. She didn't. I felt like her character didn't go anywhere in the parts of as far as I got in the game, and I felt like they did nothing to really make her feel like an actual character. She's one of the first characters in Final Fantasy history that felt more like eye candy than like a character to me. I don't think she was like awful. She wasn't like right down there with fucking Vaughn. But like there just wasn't a lot to her. I think I might put her right next to like Palom and Lulu. Yeah, I think they're kind of in the same boat there. I'm gonna save the only characters in FF12 I actually like for last on the before I move to FF13. Um, I think Bash, whatever his name was a little bit better. Like he had at least a little bit going for him, but like he kind of felt like FF12's problem for me, and I'm not gonna go in a full rant here, but FF12's problem for me felt like the writers wanted to tell a world story, like a political intrigue story, and thought that would be enough. Thought they didn't have to care about the characters, if they just made a political intrigue story. And that's not how things work. You need good characters to make me care about the world, to make me care about the politics. And FF12 had none of those. Now, the two characters that I will give a little bit of a nod to are Fran and Balthier. Fran and Balthier had charisma between them. They had, there was a good degree of like chemistry going on with them as characters. And I thought they were definitely the highest point of the game. The game still sucked ass, but they were actually decent characters. They weren't great characters, but they were decent characters. And that's, better than I can say for any of the other characters in that game. Onward to Final Fantasy XIII, I hold a lot more positive feelings for Final Fantasy XIII than most, but I don't think that the cast was the reason why that game was good for me. Like, the cast wasn't terrible. We're not saying we're going to be dropping a whole bunch of these in F or anything. But FF13 had a lot of good going for it, and the cast was just kind of okay. I think Lightning was a slightly better Cloud. I think I'll put her kind of towards the upper end of B tier. There was a lot of character development for her, and they did a good job of making her feel like a person, even if they didn't do a good job of making her feel like she felt things for a lot of it. They really tried their best to kind of stone face her, and I don't think it did her justice. I think they were trying to avoid the stereotype of the emotional female stereotype, but they went too far in the stone face, and I think it kind of failed. It kind of didn't serve her character well. I really liked Saz. I thought Saz and Dodge had such a good story. I thought Saz was such a relatable character as like he had no reason to be there other than he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but he just desperately wanted to get back to his son. And whatever would get him to his son, he was willing to do. And that worked really well for me. I liked his character a lot. Snow, it's funny. I used to hate Snow's character. I still don't like him. But I feel kind of similarly to him, not quite as positively, but similarly to him as I do about Barrett, where, like, I don't like him. Pardon me, but that doesn't mean he's a bad character. Sorry, just choking. I think Snow's story actually had a lot going for it, and I'm gonna put him kind of in the lower echelons of B. Maybe kind of with Yuna-ish. Like, I appreciated the fact that they kind of built a character who was made to be kind of being an optimist to hide his pain. And I thought that worked really well for him in what it was. I think in FF13 2, they kind of really did a bad job on pushing his character further, and in Lightning Returns, even worse. But I think in the original FF13, Snow was actually not as bad as my original instinct said. I thought I still don't like him, and I probably never will, but there's more to him than I gave him credit for in my early opinions of him. Similar to Vanille, I actually like Vanille a lot, and I'm gonna put Vanille and Fang both up next to each other in the A tier. I wish I could widen this so that it would be still on one line. But anyways, I think Vanilla and Fang have once you get to the end of the game and you realize like the full truth of their story, I think Vanilla and Fang are fantastic characters, and I think that it's great to have representation like that. I think they might be the Final Fantasy series' first gay couple. So that's pretty cool. But I really like the idea of what the two of them are supposed to be. That they're this. They've already gone through this whole show, this whole song and dance once, and failed, and they lost each other. Not literally, they were together, but they were no longer together in real sense. So they just want to find a way through this that lets them still be with each other, and like that is their only goal. They are trying to find a way through that doesn't sacrifice either of them. But both of them feel like they should be the one to sacrifice if like a sacrifice is needed, and I think that that's really solid. Um, Hope is my. I don't like Hope. I don't think Hope is well written. I don't think Hope is well realized. I don't think Hope is as bad as Waka, but Hope is an F tier character. I do not like Hope. Hope can die in a fire. He just he's just so irrational and his growth is so unearned. Anyways, onward to the Final Fantasy road trip. And to be honest, I actually really like the entire cast of FF15, and it's not really possible to talk about them separately. They kind of are all one unit. I do think that Prompto they did a less good job with than with the others, but not much, so he's just kind of the tiniest little bit below. Let's get the music going again. So he's just the tiniest bit below, but still, I think all of these characters are very strong characters as a whole, and I think it's very, very easy to like the characters, and they all have they all have extremely believable like growth arcs. Ignis coming to terms with his blindness and such is really fascinating, and Gladiolus, I used to not like Gladiolus because he came across as a bully, but I think I've come to recognize that like he's just he's just meant to be a representation of like the overly masculine type. And I just really don't resonate well with that type. So I'm kind of looking at Gladiolus the same way I'm looking at similarly Barrett or characters like that where like they are well written characters. The character just didn't vibe well with me. Um and even Prompto's arc was also quite good. So like the four of them are actually some of the best characters in the series, and it's fascinating that this game that plays nothing like the other Final Fantasies and really focused on just a it focused on a core cast of like four characters who knew each other, the kind of band of brothers style from like FF3. But like wasn't really an adventure. It was just them, having fun together until suddenly shit hit the fan. And that was kind of a weird progression, but it really worked for those characters. Like it really, really worked for those characters. So I props to them for that, I guess. Um, and now we've got Final Fantasy XVI's Clive. I think Clive was a decent character. I don't think Clive was an amazing character. I think Jill and the dog were way better characters. But Clive was the only playable character, so. Um, I think I think I'll put Clive kind of right next to like Cecil. I think that he's a good character. He's a solid character. He's definitely in like the top 20 or so. Well, no, I guess not. He's 20. He's about 25th. Nope. So, yeah. But I'm pretty happy with this. I think this is a good tier list for what I'm looking for here. Let's zoom out a little bit so you guys can see the full tier list and I can get a screen capture of it.